Coming up on today's Locked On Bucks, the Bucks advance to the finals of the NBA Cup with a thrilling win over the Atlanta Hawks. Camille and I recap that, the major takeaways from the win, the positive signs we've seen from this Bucks group for the last month, and preview a tough matchup with the Thunder next on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. We thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen of the day each and every day, and encourage you to check out the Locked On Bucks newsletter, your favorite team now with its own newsletter delivered directly to your inbox daily and for free. Sign up for free today at lockedondaily.com. Again, lockedondaily.com to start your day with the all-new free Locked On Bucks newsletter. Today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood Gold. The privileges of a high net worth for any worth come your way with Robinhood Gold. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Camille, the gold standard for the Bucks for the last decade plus has been Giannis Antetokounmpo, and that certainly carried through in the semifinals against the Atlanta Hawks again on Saturday night, as Giannis was the best player on the floor. And Look, the Bucks have been doing a lot of things much better for the last really month and a half now, as we've really detailed, but it ultimately starts with Giannis. There's little things we can add and say, well, this has helped and these things have changed. But if Giannis isn't playing like an MVP, that stuff doesn't matter. And the Bucks are certainly not advancing to Tuesday night to play the Thunder.
And Giannis came through on both sides of the ball. He finished the game with a near triple-double in this one, 32 points, 14 boards, 9 assists, 10 of 15 from the field. He has just, the efficiency there from him. And even at the free throw line, like you saw the game start and the broadcast is calling out the fact that he has been struggling from the free throw line this season. The commentators even made a quip about that's
you can name him Stan Van Gundy, very harsh.
This could haunt you in the playoffs. And I was thinking when he said it, I don't worry about Giannis at the free throw line in clutch situations after that finals run. One, he never runs away from it. He's going to remain aggressive. And two, in this game, he finished 8 of 10 from the free throw line after he started 4 of 8. He never has any fear about that. And to your point about just Giannis being Giannis, that consistent engine, he set the pace and the tone for this team, I think, offensively and defensively, especially with the 4 blocks in that last one he had in the fourth quarter on that Capella lob attempt.
And also, look, I'm not going to sit here and say that 60% free throw shooting is ideal. And it's fine. You'd love to see it improve. Like we've tossed out, look, if Giannis is a 70% free throw shooter consistently, that solves a lot of things. Damian Lillard being there changes a part of that. Khris Middleton's return changes it too. We'll get to some of those late game situations. And one suggestion we both had go forward, but this is nothing new. Are you just discovering you'd like to see the free throw shooting from Giannis creep up, because that could really cost them in the playoffs when this team has won a championship with that shooting. And as you pointed out, the numbers may not always back it up, but Giannis has said himself, look, I make them when they count. And by and large, that's what we've seen. This game, the way it started, kind of felt a lot like last year's semifinal game, where I think the Pacers were up, or the Bucks were up 2 going into the second quarter. The Hawks were up 2 going into the second quarter on Saturday, and it was nearly an identical score. The difference was the Pacers blew the Bucks off the floor in that second quarter, and you got the sense of, man, this is just an old team, and it's probably larger discussions to have despite this record and everything else that we've seen. I was talking with somebody who will remain unnamed, that's close to the team.
Protect the sources,
during the game, and they were saying, do you think we should really win this game? Maybe being one of the oldest teams in the league, is it better off to lose because, and this was late in the game, because this isn't like last year. This has been a competitive game. There were no major lead swings. The Bucks had a double-digit lead that was it. They never fell behind by double digits, and it seemed like that margin sat around 5 for basically the duration of the game. And for a brief moment, it got you to thinking of maybe like you get a full week off, and maybe that's pretty good for this team moving forward. But then the further you got in the game, like, no. And the message we've heard from Doc and the rest of the guys, they want to win this, taking the financial bonuses out of it. They want to win this thing. Yep. And the other thing is this, Camille, I do really feel this way, that we've made a lot and heard a lot of discourse around what this tournament does for young teams. And the example of the Pacers a year ago of Rick Carlisle pointed out, hey, I don't know if we reached the conference finals if it wasn't for this. The Magic getting to experience a playoff-like game. I know they're in the playoffs last year, but just getting more of those, more of that experience in those situations. I think it helps the Bucks as well because, Giannis and Khris and Brook and Bobby, they've played together and won a championship together and been through those moments. But we keep having these conversations of, all right, you'd like a long runway of Giannis and Dame and Khris together. And like, especially in these moments and with new pieces as important as they have been to this team's resurgence, and guys like Gary Trent Jr., young guys too, like, I think this is just as valuable for the Bucks as it is for any young team that hasn't been in the playoffs or hasn't had much playoff experience.
I agree. I mean, to your point about the discourse around the NBA Cup, there are so many people who were like, this doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things because it's December. Like, determined in December, what does it matter? And for this Bucks team, of course, you've talked about how the younger teams can benefit from them, but with the Bucks starting 2-8 this year, and all of the discourse that was around this team for their poor play at that time and what it meant, people were trying to extrapolate and saying like, oh, they're doomed, they can't do this. To be in this position where you're playing some intense basketball in December after you got off to a slow start to begin your season, I think it's really good for this team to be put in that position. It's a way to simulate like playoff intensity. Yeah. It's not the playoffs. We all know that. We understand that. But these are guys who are playing for something and they want to win. And with that, you are seeing this Bucks team come together. You're seeing them get valuable reps and experience down the stretch. Now, I know we're going to talk more about Khris Middleton's play later on in the show, but it's good for them to be getting these reps together in these situations against a Hawks team that, as we've discussed, they're a good team, especially when they're playing against some of the better competition in the league. They really show up for those games. So I think the NBA Cup has been good for the Bucks. And yes, could be nice to have a week off with the rest, but with the way that the NBA has done the Cup this year, with how they've scheduled it, there is still a lot of rest built in for it. And I know the Bucks have a lot of games coming out of the Cup, but like if they were looking to rest a game, I could see them doing it against the Wizards on the second night of a back-to-back if they needed to coming out of the Cup game. But right now, like, you have a chance to win something. Go ahead and try to win it. Like, it's cool to do that. Like, yeah, go and win something.
They're now just one game back in the loss column from third in the Eastern Conference too. And look, a big part of that is, or at least a sizable chunk of that is, the Eastern Conference is the Eastern Conference, as we've all heard. But hey, there's suddenly 7 teams that are above 500 in the East. So it's no longer just 3 that we were talking about. But yes, in terms of the win-loss record, top to bottom versus the Western Conference, it's a much bigger difference that we're seeing in the East versus the West. So that's a part of it. But they've gone 12-3 since that 2-8 start. And look, you can point to the schedule all you want, but you still have to win those games. Like, what's worse, the Bucks beating those teams or the Bucks losing to those teams and saying, oh, great, so 2-8, you followed that up with a 500 run against teams that you should have beaten. That's not going to inspire confidence. And I would also point out, I've referenced a lot of numbers dating back to November 1st because it felt like, number one, that's a clean, easy break to make of, okay, from November 1 onward, here's how they've looked. But also, that was right around the time that it did feel like we were starting to see a little bit of movement after a 1-4 start, and that embarrassment in Memphis on Halloween evening. You had the back-to-back games against the Cavaliers that were decided by 3 total points. And one of those you played without Giannis. So you were very competitive in those games. You blew the Utah Jazz off the floor. Now you had another clunker against the New York Knicks, but that was it. If you look at all the games they've played since then, 2 competitive losses to the Cavaliers, a competitive loss to the Boston Celtics, a game you'd like to take back against the New York Knicks. But other than that, the controversial loss to the Charlotte Hornets, that loss to the Atlanta Hawks that was referenced a lot coming into this game when that was night 2 of a back-to-back for the Bucks, and then a loss to the Boston Celtics where it was extremely competitive start to finish and none of those real big swings and variances. So that's why I keep going back to November 1st, because this has been a much different team from that point onward. And, that's why I do think what we're seeing tracks. Not to say the Bucks are going to play at a 12-3 pace for the rest of the year, but look, I get the notion of they're beating up bad teams, sure, but they're starting to beat good teams. They were playing competitive against good teams, and we said, all right, the next step is to win those games. They've started to do it. I mean, we've given praise to the Atlanta Hawks. They've been a very good team so far this season. They beat the Houston Rockets, who you thought maybe you were going to see again. They haven't had many of these cracks, but they've now, and the Magic too, have had one of the more elite defenses in the league. And I get they're without Franz and Paolo, but defense is what's done it for. Defense. Yeah, and that's who they beat. So that's starting to move in the right direction as well. It's not going to get any easier against the Oklahoma City Thunder. So we'll preview a bit of that matchup. A couple of things I want to get off my chest about the NBA Cup as well, and some things I think the league can do better to promote and really clear up some of the confusion. So we'll get into that conversation coming up after the break here on Locked On Bucks. Time to talk to you about Robinhood Gold. As with Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. The next segment of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by BetterHelp. It's that time of year where we're all searching for gratitude, giving gratitude and thanks to individuals or anything in our life that helps get us through some of these challenging and frankly crazy times. But don't overlook yourself when talking about gratitude. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It is entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. To get started, all you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire, and from there, you'll get matched with a licensed therapist. You can even switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. So really quickly here, Camille, I've heard this quite a bit, even from people that follow the NBA relatively closely. The debate going into the semifinals of quarterfinals, I should say. Mm-hmm. Is it better off for our team to lose this because then you don't have to play the extra games? There are no extra games. These are regular season games that are being played. The only time you could have that conversation was yesterday, was Saturday, with the Bucks and the Rockets and the Thunder, the Hawks as well. Those are the teams that would potentially play an extra game that does not count in the standings. So I still think there's a lot of confusion surrounding, well, if you advance into the tournament, then you're playing more games than the rest of the group. You're not. Yeah. When the schedule comes out, 80 games are scheduled. So if you're advancing in the tournament, those are the 2 games that were unscheduled. If you're not, you're playing 2 games on the fly against other teams that did not qualify. So that thing still seems to be confusing to some Bucks fans and to NBA fans, not just Bucks fans. And the other one is, so this game Tuesday does not count. The stats
in the regular season standings, yeah.
Regular season, yeah. The stats won't count for individual players, for any of the team metrics, any of that. It is basically just to say you won the NBA Cup and the players get that bonus. I still think something else has to be attached to this. I
To the
don't
tournament
know
as a whole, or like the
the
championship game?
to the winner. Yeah. So, like, I know people have kicked around, well, do you give him an extra draft pick or something like that? That just gets too messy. And like, where does it slot in? Is it the first pick outside of the lottery? Things like that. That seems to be very complicated. To me, what I would do is, and I don't think this would be a major incentive for a lot of teams, but it's still something, is this game counts for the winner in the sense that if you win this game, you would win the tiebreaker in any spot that you were in, where you would have that extra win. If the Bucks finished tied with, let's say, the Knicks for the 4 seed, they won that game to give them an extra game, so they win that tiebreaker. I would do something like that.
That's not a bad idea. I think for now, as we still are getting used to the NBA Cup in the middle of the regular season and I should say beginning of the regular season, like slow rolling it in there. Like, I don't think that's a bad idea necessarily going forward. I did see a concept brought up as well, a way to improve it, which was making all of the cup games played at the same, like back to back to back, instead of spreading them out as much, where it's like you're getting a more like, it's still regular season games, but all the cup games are going to be a 2-week stretch rather than stretched out for a month or however they have it now, just so that you get the consistent of like, okay, we're still in group play. Now we're out of group play. Now we're into the, the knockout round and going forward from there. And that was a concept that I liked because, again, it's 2 additional regular season games, or you schedule with 80 games to come into the season. If you win in advance, then the schedule, it changes at that point. And even if you lose, then you get your schedule with the other losers. And I'm going to say that other losers, because, we're in the finals here, Justin. We're going to live that up for the moment. But again, I like the cup and what it does. And I think, to your point about who the Bucks have been playing against, this cup offers an opportunity for this Bucks team to play against some really good comp in the middle of a schedule where it can be considered pretty soft. So, like, you had the Magic team with that defense. You had this Hawks team that also can bother you defensively. And your reward for getting past all of that is playing against the best defensive team in the NBA with the Oklahoma City Thunder, which is a matchup you wouldn't have gotten, I don't believe, in 2024 at all, because we don't see the Thunder until next year. So, like, I'm here for it, especially with the now counting towards the regular season standings, if the Bucks do happen to lose, which of course we're hoping they don't.
So I got some numbers I do want to toss out here in a second about this Bucks team, but we started this show talking about Giannis and how this team is not getting to where they are without the play of Giannis. Is he back in the MVP discussion? I mean, the Bucks are still currently 6th, and look, it's December. Like, I still believe we can't fully dig into debating MVPs until you at least get to that week of the All-Star game, once we get to that point. But we said coming into the year, if the Bucks were going to be one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference and the partnership between he and Giannis, or he and Dame, looked what we anticipated it to be, I think there's an opening for him, because maybe you run into Nikola Jokic fatigue. Who else would it be in the Eastern Conference? And even applying that over to this year, the Cavaliers have been excellent, right? I don't think they've been excellent because Donovan Mitchell has played like an MVP. They've gotten a big bounce back from Darius Garland. Donovan Mitchell's been very good. Their defense has been good. Kenny Atkinson has been great for that team. The Celtics. I'm not on board with the Jason Tatum as an MVP candidate.
It's going to be pushed, though.
There's going to be a lot of push for that. The Knicks, Karl Anthony Towns has been incredible for that team. There's a lot of metrics that point out he has been the opposite of that defensively for them. So it's just tough to find these. The Magic are getting it done, as we mentioned, with their defense. So in terms of individuals in the East, I think it's pretty open for Giannis to be the guy that emerges from the East if the Bucks continue to play like this. But more importantly, we mentioned they're only a game back in the loss column of the 3 seed.
Yeah.
I will say this. I don't think he has any shots, regardless of what the numbers are, of winning the MVP if the Bucks finish lower than third in the Eastern Conference?
I think it would depend on what those records are. Like if it's a situation where it's similar to last year, where it's a game or two that is separating the, was it 3 through 5 in the East last year or 2 through 4? Then it could be like if he's the 4 seed and he's really dominating, I think, because I think with the MVP conversation, part of it is narrative as well. And with the way that the Bucks started at 2-8, a lot of people are going to attribute the Bucks climb out of, those terrible places in the standings to Giannis's play. And I think he's a big part of it. We've talked in large part about all the other pieces that go along with it, but I think the narrative piece of it is strong for Giannis. I think what he's doing on the court, again, shooting really efficiently from the field, leading the NBA in scoring, like the numbers are there. Again, it's early. It is December 15th as we record this. There's a lot of basketball left to be played, but I think, as I've been saying, like MVP level play from Giannis. I think that if you are starting the race, like he's been in it since the Bucks really started rolling over the last month or so for this team. So Giannis, I think, in that MVP race. And I think his showing on this NBA Cup stage, which again, people are going to laugh at it, but it was a nationally televised game where they're the only game on TV and people got to see the two-way genius of Giannis again. They got to see him crashing the glass. They got to see him setting up his teammates. They got to see what we've been seeing night in and night out this season. So yes, I think Giannis is firmly in that MVP race. I think he's an Eastern Conference favorite, but some guys in the West that are hooping as well. So he's going to have to compete with them along the way.
Yeah, and that's my only point on him being, he has to be in the top 3 in the East because number one, the narrative surrounding the Eastern Conference as the JV squad that is out there for most of talking heads. And look, it has not stacked up with the West so far, at least. But Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has been incredible. He has a very strong case for the MVP with the Oklahoma City Thunder. I know it hasn't been the start that they had hoped for, but the Mavs are still 4th in terms of individually with Luka. You can't rule out Luka Doncic having a monster second half and the Mavs getting into that mix of 2nd or 3rd in the Western Conference. And his name strongly emerging. Nikola Jokic statistically just keeps doing it. And the same discussion we've had about Giannis, better year after year after year. Now his team is currently 6th. But again, if Denver goes on a run, he's in that picture too. So you have very strong candidates in the West that, to me, the only way to get there is if the Bucks are all of a sudden, man, they've really righted the ship. And now this team is pushing for maybe even a top 2 seed, but certainly a top 3 seed in the Eastern Conference. Speaking of really righting the ship, some numbers to throw out there dating back to this run where the Bucks have won the most games in the league since that 2-8 start, and some very impressive numbers that show just why this is getting done. So we'll get into that discussion and take a look at this Oklahoma City Thunder team they will be facing for the finals of the NBA Cup. We'll have that discussion next on Locked On Bucks. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So as we mentioned, Camille, since that 2-8 start for the Bucks, they have won 12 games. The Bucks and Magic have won the most games in the league since that date, where the Bucks fell to 2-8 on the season. Bucks are 12-3, Magic are 12-4. The Bucks by the numbers, depending on where you look. I joked about this with Marcus Johnson on his show too. I like to go to cleaning the glass for numbers because it takes out the garbage time, and we use it a lot on this show. But in spots like this where it's Cleaning the Glass has them 8 and 11, but NBA.com has them 7 and 9. Let's go with NBA.com's numbers. That's kind of what we're seeing here. So since that date, I think it was November 12th when they dropped to 2 and 8.
Mm-hmm.
Bucks are 12 and 3. Their offensive rating is 115.7, which is 10th in the league. Their defensive rating is 110, which is 8th. And a net rating of 5.7, which is 10th. So by the NBA's numbers, the Bucks are a top 10 team in all three of those areas that you typically look at and circle for where does this team stack up and rank. Cleaning the glass, again, taking out the garbage time. They're 9th in offense, 12th in defense, 10th in net rating. So they're essentially a top 10 team across the board. And again, yes, they've beaten bad teams in that stretch, but it includes the competitive losses that you've had as well against the Celtics twice and a clunker against the New York Knicks in there as well. So it is getting to be a pretty big sample of work. And that's the other thing. We talk about sample size a lot. 15 games that we're talking about where this is where they've sat.
It is. And when you look at it, I saw Eric Name write about this in Athletic, where he was talking about that win streak as well and saying, like, of those 12 wins the Bucks have gotten over the last 15, only 5 of those have been by double digits. Like, the Bucks have been in some very competitive situations in these games. Some might point to that and be like, well, maybe some of these games should be bigger blowouts because of who you're playing against. But I think for this Bucks team, learning to win and figuring out ways to win when you need to has been valuable for them after how they started this season as well. It's a lot of basketball left to be played. Like, we're talking about this 15-game sample size after the first initial 10-game sample size. Like, we're a little bit over a quarter into the season. There are still like 55 games left for this Bucks team to play. And at this point, we're really just trying to figure out, like, who is this Milwaukee Bucks team? Who are the 2024-25 Milwaukee Bucks? And they're figuring it out. And I think that what we've been seeing is a lot of connectivity from this team offensively and defensively as well, where you mentioned how they're ranking top 10 in both of those areas over the stretch. Offensively, you've been seeing them move the ball a lot better. You've been seeing Dame with the assists, Giannis with the assists. We've seen Khris come back into the lineup and what he's done with his additional playmaking that he brings. Although against the Hawks, not a good game. And I would just like to state, a bad game does not make a bad player. Like, Khris admitted himself, like, a bad game, and it happens from time to time. And he has an opportunity on Tuesday to get right back to it. But you have these situations where you're seeing the offense starting to find ways to come together. You've been seeing the defense clicking a bit more. I was happy to see Brook Lopez have a good game against the Hawks as well. He was somebody we talked about in our preview of just somebody like, I want to see him be active in this game. You saw him affecting shots at the rim. You saw him getting some blocks. You saw him score over double-digit points in this game. Like, the connectivity of this team has really been coming together over these last 15 games for him. And you love to see that at this point in the season. Now, if there are some things that we can identify for them to clean up now, and we still see that happening, in March, then it's a problem. But for right now, what this Bucks team has been able to do over the last 15 games, I think is impressive after how they've started.
Yeah, and a couple of things on the individuals that you brought up there before we do, not to to get too far off of it, but I talked about this yesterday, Saturday, on the post-game radio show. But what's stood out since this resurgence is not only the defense has improved some things, like they're still giving up a ton of transition opportunities. They've gotten better at defending in those spots. Against the Hawks, they were tremendous by the numbers in transition defense. Now, the caveat I would apply is what's not included in those numbers when you go to cleaning the glass are those situations that we saw a couple of times where the Hawks were running on the Bucks on makes. But that wasn't an issue really in the second half. It was popping up a decent amount, a couple of times in the first half. So they've at least gotten better defending those spots. I don't think they're ever going to be a top 10 team. In like not only efficiency but volume especially. So just at least be around league average, which they've been, and really hone in on half court defense, which again they've been pretty good at. But clutch situations is the other thing that stands out. We talked about this earlier in the season. The Bucks and the Thunder for the longest time, first couple of weeks into the season, were the only two teams that had not been in a clutch situation. And it was obviously for two very different reasons. The Thunder were blowing their opponents out. The Bucks were losing a lot of games, and not the game that they won against Philly was out of hand. The Jazz, they blew out by 23. There was no clutch in there. So they didn't get those opportunities.
Right.
They've gotten a ton of them since this 12-3 run here. So as a whole, the Bucks have gone 8-5 in those clutch games. 13 instances, trails the Hornets, Celtics, Warriors, Rockets, Pacers, Timberwolves, Kings, Hawks, and Suns. But defensively, they've been really good. A 99.2 defensive rating in the clutch. That trails only the Orlando Magic, who have an 88 defensive rating, which is crazy.
Crazy.
And it's 59 minutes of clutch time for the Bucks. Like when I mentioned that, a few people reached out and were like, that seems like an outlier for the Magic, and saying like, no, like if we saw it against the Bucks in the quarterfinals, if you watch Magic games, no, this is their defense. They're athletic, they're quick, they're physical. Like that's how their defense plays. Mm-hmm. But going back to that that date range, since this turnaround in this 12-3 record, Bucks are 8-2 in the clutch. So backing up that article of Eric Names, that there's not a lot of blowouts. You've played 15 of those games, 10 of them have been clutch situations. 45 minutes of the 59 have been in these spots. That is the most in the league since that date range. Their 8 wins is the most in the league since that date range. And their defense is an 88.4 in the clutch, trailing only, this one I would say is an outlier, trailing only the Clippers, who have played just 13 minutes and have a 70.8 defensive rating. So the Bucks and the Magic have been the two best teams with the highest volume in that date range. 88.4 for the Bucks, 90.0 for the Magic. So that's the other notable thing. Mm-hmm. This defense has come up with stops when they've needed it.
They have. And again, I think about this Hawks game that we just witnessed, to see them get to the finals of the NBA Cup, where down the stretch, the defensive plays, like the Hawks only scored 14 points in the fourth quarter of that game. Now, they did just miss some shots, but I think that there's another aspect of it with the Bucks defense affecting some of the things that the Hawks were doing. And I think holding the Hawks to only 19 points in the fourth quarter is even more impressive, with the fact that the Hawks were in the bonus for like the last 5.5-6 minutes of the fourth quarter. So to only give up 19 points as a whole in that quarter, when you need to get it done, I think was impressive for this Bucks team. And they're going to face a big challenge on Tuesday against that Thunder team, which I know we'll talk more about that matchup on tomorrow's show and kind of preview that bit deeper there.
Yeah, we found so many nuggets on the defense and everything else here that we didn't really have time to dig into the Thunder, but that's the good news. 2 days off between games. So we're going to take a look at the Thunder on tomorrow's show and preview that matchup. I mean, look, the spoiler alert is the Oklahoma City Thunder are very good and arguably the best team the Bucks will have faced so far this season. So it's certainly going to be a challenge. We'll dig into the matchup on tomorrow's show, but we do know the Bucks are playing in the finals of the NBA Cup. That'll do it for today's show. For Camille, I'm Justin. We will talk to you guys once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.